Hey guys, and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Arc Raiders talk. Today we're looking at what's coming for Arc Raiders based on the interviews, dev announcements, and all the news that have just come out recently. So there is a lot to highlight. Let's just begin. First up, the rebalance of the game as we know it, which I think is important. The brilliant thing about rebalance is the fact that you don't need to create new content. You can tweak numbers so it can quote unquote be done at any time and doesn't demand a lot of resources. It would change the flow and meta of the game as we know it, and I think changes of that nature are important because it refreshes the approach of combat, be that PvP or PvE, especially when the known meta becomes a bit stale, as I feel it has been with the lower quality weapons like Sticher, Kettle, even the Ferro. You know, they're so commonly used because of the low investment and yet higher rewards and potential these weapons have. Certainly in comparison to the higher quality weapons, which are a lot more expensive to run for a lot less reward. So in a time between content releases, balance changes can be a fun and effective update to go for, and we now have confirmation that it's happening. This comes from the Arc Raiders official Discord, as various CMs are posting the same response to complainers in those chats. We see multiple examples of essentially the same message being posted in response to people like that. Here's what it says. The holidays delayed things a bit, but the dev team want you to know that they're looking into balance. For example, the Sticher, the Kettle, and the Triggerade. Rest assured then that we hear you and we're working on delivering a good gaming experience. Things are just not immediate. So fair play there. We just had the holidays. They need time off. They've done a great job with the game and releasing content in that initial period. But now we know that at the very least they're looking at the Sticher, the Kettle, and the Triggerades. How do I feel about that? Well, initially the Triggerade is an obvious one. It's probably one of the most complained about aspects of PvP or the game in general. The reason for that is because the Triggerade does kind of like some of the most damage you can do with a single explosion. It's incredibly easy to throw and accurately hit a target. It sticks to targets. The AoE is big. This results in an incredibly cheap and efficient way to take down some of the big arc, but also destroy other players in PvP, especially when it's corner holding that we're talking about, or in a 3v3 scenario where that happens a lot. Just throwing a load of these, it just takes the skill out of the fight and kills people. There are many ways they could go about nerfing that or changing the access to them, maybe leaving them being a very powerful thing, but making them a lot more expensive to run. I do have my concerns about this in regards to the hullcracker. When they nerfed it in terms of function, they nerfed it in terms of access. Like the costs are insane, the crafting's expensive, so on and so on. With the hullcracker, it felt like they hit it from too many sides at once. But at the same time, if they absolutely killed Triggerades, I wouldn't be that bothered. They're too common and popular. They need something major. In regards to the Sticher and Kettle then, that brings up the whole cheap weapons that are overly performing and kind of, you just don't use a variety of weapons because it's just easier to use a Sticher or a Kettle because it's cheap as hell to craft or buy, cheap as hell to upgrade to level 3 or 4, and then really cheap to repair and run infinitely. You don't even need attachments, but the attachments themselves can be very basic and effective, or yes, you can invest a lot into them and get something really incredible out of it. With a Sticher, you're able to mag dump people in PvP, one mag that's relatively accurate for 70% or more, especially with headshots, it'll kill anyone. The Kettle time to kill is actually better when you take into account headshots, which are very easy to land as you're not getting any like recoil really with an upgraded version of a Kettle. When trading with someone and they're standing ADSing, it's so easy to tap them in the head and you get to stat check people. And when everyone is using Stichers and Kettles, it gets very monotonous in that way as well. I really enjoy these weapons and I don't want to see them go into like bad use, like I don't want to use them, like original Rattler sucked. But they are overly good and efficient, and that's a problem for the game and the weapons as a whole, I feel. So there are many ways they could go about this. One thing that I've mentioned before is durability. That way you can keep the same awesome weapon, but like, let's say it burns for durability really quick because it's just like, you know, this bit of scrap that you've crammed together compared to like an interesting and effective weapon. There's more like a functional assault rifle like the Tempest. On the other hand, you have changes that I would love to see that they haven't called out, like your epic weapons. I would love to see them and their durability and benefits of use skyrocket, meaning the expensive craft and upgrading and repairing of these epic weapons should result in something. Maybe it's something simple like your purple weapons, they last comically long, like you basically never have to repair them. But what other new content is coming around the corner outside of balance tweaks? Well, firstly, we know of the toxic swamp map condition, which seems to line nicely around the end of the cold snap event, and the map condition generally. Maybe we'll get a new progression track to work on at some point soon, maybe with that a new project, although that did feel a bit more seasonal to be fair. There's a blog post about this by FRVR, talking about data mining that happened around the patch of 1.7.2. where the files being updated and prepping for new content, people were able to look into that and see what's coming. Now, according to those data mines, on January 19th, that'll introduce, the toxic swamp map condition. The new map condition, according to that, data mine, will be tied specifically to the damn battlegrounds map. So it won't be like Cold Snap that spreads across different maps, but more like a map-specific one, like the various ones we have Spaceport. We don't know anything about this toxic swamp condition, really, other than reasonable speculation, in that you would go there for some reason. Maybe there's something new there, new arc, new rewards, or significantly increased loot, whatever it is. But in exchange, there's going to be danger to it. With what we've seen with Cold Snap, I could see them introducing new mechanics, where you're going to be poisoned by the swamp, so you need to wear specific gear, use specific items, make yourself immune to the effects temporarily, that kind of thing. Is the timeline they said concrete though? The whole 19th of January? Well, absolutely not. People thought, based on similar data mines around that time, that the hidden bunker would return on a date later than it actually did, so immediately they're not correct. But I do think the map condition is very likely, it's just a question of when and how. I mean, outside of that, I would love to see new content in the form of new arc, which I think is a major draw for the game in general, but also new weapons, of course. Yeah, that could be guns, but that doesn't mean just guns. It could be gadgets, utility, kinds of nades. They're really fun to engage with. They've had great success with the first introduction of new versions of that, like say the Seeker nades and the Trailblazers, and based on how well they're being used and received, I have faith in them to create more unique items of that kind, and they could do it with the Swamp. Moving on, I want to talk about the confirmation of aggression matchmaking, which has been something that's been obvious in the community. We've talked about it a lot, but now it's confirmed by the CEO of the game. There's this live gameplay conversation they did. A lot of details came out of that were mentioned that's been interesting. But just to get to the point, in a discussion about the fact that Ark Raiders is a PvP VE game, a big part of the tension is that maybe someone that you've met might betray you, or you might encounter a player that changes the scenario with the arc. They help you or they attack you. And back have talked about that the experience wouldn't work the same without the threat of that PvP. But obviously there's been a load of talk about aggression-based matchmaking and how it's very clearly real. Well, the CEO, Soderlund, did reveal that that system does exist, but he claims that it's a very recent addition, which personally I don't believe. And the way he describes the matchmaking is interesting. He says, first it's skill-based, of course, then you have solos, duos and trios, and then since about a week ago at the time of this conversation, we introduced a system where we also matchmake based on how prone you are to PvP or PvE. Going on to then say, I had someone ask me, is there aggression-based matchmaking? To which Soderlund replied, that's exactly what it is. So, in no unclear terms, aggression matchmaking was confirmed, but the claim was that it was relatively recent. And again, I said I don't really believe that. I would see that more that they've had it outed, it's become more popular and relatively known, and it's been accepted as a concept, so now they're finally talking about it. But the reason that I don't think it's exactly true is because of the varied experience players have had through Ark Raiders since its launch. And the many cases of people talking about their loot runs and experience with that, and how everyone they meet is friendly, but then everyone's having a completely different experience in their own raids, where sometimes people shoot them, or it's like shoot on sight every single time, which is essentially outing themselves that they shoot people on sight every time, so they got put in the aggressive lobbies. There is discussion about what kind of lobbies are there, and a generally accepted concept of super friendly lobbies, somewhere in the middle where you might have people attack you, you might not, and then the everyone shoots on sight lobbies. And you seem to be able to scale which lobbies you get in based on your behavior within the raids. So the easy way to get into super friendly lobbies is load up free kits, let people shoot you until eventually you're in friendly lobbies where you're not going to shoot anyone anyway. Personally, I think that this is an interesting thing for the game, and I think the big part of the player base is happy with this. But I personally would rather it not be the way it stands right now, and so I think there might be changes in the future. Personally, I like the idea that there's a reasonable chance that we can bump into each other as players and work together, but at the same time, we might shoot each other on sight. Speaking to each other obviously has a big impact on people's behavior, and it's a fun part of the game. And as they said in that interview, the threat that someone could turn on you is an important part of the game. And when you get into those super friendly lobbies where the chance of someone attacking you is all but zero, that threat is removed. In my experience, when I learned about aggression matchmaking for the expedition wipe, I stopped shooting anyone. I intentionally got myself into those friendly lobbies, and then I haven't shot a single player all of this wipe. And it's been what, like 3 weeks now? In those 3 weeks, I've been attacked by a player 3 times in my friendly lobbies. That's incredibly rare. And basically, I function whenever I see a player, I expect them not to shoot me or even work with me or speak to me. That's been my experience doing this. So that whole important part, as they say, isn't part of the game for me because I don't shoot players. At least this expedition while I was progressing. Therefore, I could imagine them changing and tweaking the aggression matchmaking in the future. Not telling us about it, by the way, I wouldn't expect them to. But you might experience more PvP in the game. But at the same time, they do want people to have PvE focused lobbies. It's a major part of the player base. And there's a lot of people that it seems like if they could choose to press a button and PvP would be removed from the game for them, they'd press it. So they do maybe want to cater to those people as well. I also want to mention the idea of PvP leaderboards and stuff like that, the perspective they have on PvP. Again, in that interview with Soderlund, he explained as well that the game isn't a competitive game. So, you know, esports, rank modes, that kind of thing, they don't consider it in the category of that nature. When asked directly about the idea of PvP leaderboards to track which players are aggressive and how they compare to one another, that's when Soderlund highlighted the non-competitive nature of the game. He stated that the game isn't about shooting other players, even though you can. So you can consider that stance for PvP there, as they allow it, but they aren't defining the game by it. They aren't encouraging it through systems such as ranked, leaderboards, rewards, or otherwise. So yes, an interesting perspective to hear about. I also want to reference another thing that was brought up by FRVR about the concept of the price of Arc Raiders. Obviously, as a game, with the amount of hundreds of hours people are getting out of it, it was very cheap, especially in a world where game releases are getting more expensive, and there's been these conversations about like $100 games and how heinous that is. Meanwhile, you get something like Ark, or say the recent Silk Song, that are incredible games that are reasonably priced. Insane. And we're seeing more examples of that, where, you know, Helldivers did it, and then Marathon coming from Bungie, they're keeping it at a cheap price as well. Arc Raiders is actually meant to be initially a free-to-play PvE game, and obviously a lot since then has changed. But they claim that Helldivers 2, its success and their cheaper $40 price influenced their change in how expensive they made the game in the end. They made it a game that you actually had to pay for because what they were doing for the free version was making it hard to respect the player time. Free-to-play games, you know, exhaustion mechanics and all that BS, microtransactions. It was again the CEO that explained this. Soderlund said that the higher price for the game didn't feel fair. They don't have a story mode. They don't want the price to be offensive for someone. What they wanted was to make people feel like the game is definitely worth the price that they're asking. And I would say they definitely achieved that. Apparently, Arc Raiders was Steam's biggest selling game during the Christmas sale period, and they've sold over 12 million copies in general, which is insane. Irrelevant of all of that, the game remains absolutely massive. Even if the content you might consider is like reaching more of a dry period, because obviously they took a break, they went on holiday, they had Christmas, fair enough. Despite that, the player base numbers on Steam alone are insane, maintaining somewhere between 300 to 500k active players at once, which is unbelievably successful. I would have expected that the game would have had its peak, then there would be a dip, then they would do the expedition, then there would be a peak or like a recovery, and then a relatively quick drop off because people are doing the same thing again. The reality is this ridiculous consistent wave since its launch. Part of that could be that it's a lot of people's first extraction shooter, and the novelty and unique experience that provides is far from finished for people. The PvP is really fun, the PvE is really unique, and then the extraction shooter genre is one of my favorites of all time. And you know, not everyone's a hardcore gamer. Casual players can extend the life of a game massively by taking their progress a lot slower and enjoying it in a more casual manner. But yeah, that's what I just wanted to cover, a lot of the big topics that have come up in the last week or so. And hopefully very soon we get a roadmap for 2026. We get information about that balance update. Will we see the swamp map come on January 19th sooner or later? and what's going to come with that. I think that's around the time we should expect new information of that nature, or at least the roadmap. Anyway, we'll be covering it all as it happens. So until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.